Happy Halloween, and welcome to the height of Spooky Month. And for those on the Candy Corn Conga line, thanks for stopping by. Make sure to check out the card above, as well as the end page for the link to your next spooky stop. In honor of the occasion, I'm hitting a movie that pretty much defined what it meant to be a cult classic. And the fact that it's consistently been in theaters for over 45 years speaks to the power it still has to command a crowd for a titillating time. Now that I've left you shivering with anticipation, this is 1975's Rocky Horror Picture Show. We open with lips. Patricia Quinn's lips, no less, which serve as a backdrop for opening credits with some very descriptive titles like Scientist, Groupie, Creation, Criminologist, Expert, and an ex-delivery boy. There's a fade up to a wedding, which most likely means this is going to be a sweet romantic musical, right? We get a bouquet toss, which isn't the usual knockdown drag-out affair you normally hear about. How do they keep this thing so civil? The wedding car pulls up covered in cream of either the whipped or shaving variety. Either way, they better plan to stop at a car wash or just lick it off in some version of foreplay, because that will screw with the paint job if they don't. Elsewhere, we find that Brad is a stand-up guy because his bow tie and cummerbund match. He professes his love for Janet in a graveyard in front of a Denton billboard. You know, the Home of Happiness sounds like a great place to set a TV show. Anyway, this American Gothic couple doesn't share Brad's enthusiasm as he sings about his love for Janet, ending with him popping the question. They sing about their love as a coffin gets moved into the church. That is weirdly fitting. There's some incredibly posh exposition that gets really specific about Brad's car.
It's true also that the spare tire they were carrying was badly in need of some air.
They end up blowing a tire, and Brad insists on going to find a phone alone.
Oh no, darling, there's no sense in both of us getting wet.
Which I guess means their night doesn't include any sexy time.
I'm coming with you.
Oh, I guess it does. Anyway, Janet uses a newspaper to keep dry, which works out really well, as they approach a castle with a griffin that seems to be into bondage. Riff Raff answers, offering his usual sexy gaze, and is in turn offered a firm but hearty handshake.
Hi, my name's Brad Majors.
He offers an astute observation,
You're all wet.
which makes me wonder if they did get sexy time, or if it's just the rain. Janet gets frightened.
Brad, I'm frightened.
But all I can see is a lot of dust and an amazing clock. Luckily, the door opens to a killer party with an invite to join the dance. And I am so excited to learn the steps.
It's just a jump to the left. With your hands on your hips.
Janet faints from the exposure to thrusting pelvises and party hats required for the time warp. Then a conga line breaks out, and Columbia shows off her magic feet. You know it's a banger time when the criminologist gets into the action. Everyone collapses, and Brad becomes that kind of guy to kill a mood.
One of you guys know how to Madison?
Luckily, the life of the party shows up. The one and only Dr. Frankenfurter. The good doc offers an invite.
Come up to the lab. I see you shiver with anticipation.
And Brad is surprisingly chill about being disrobed, even offering an introduction.
Hi, my name's Brad Majors, and this is my fiancée, Janet Weiss.
They jump on the elevator and get into the typical awkward small talk.
Frank, I mean, is he your husband?
Eventually meeting the good doc in pearls and a surgical gown, which is an unexpected but surprisingly fabulous combination. Frank shows off his creation, and every switch thrown comes with a killer riff. Final touches are added, including seeing the creature's bones. With a couple of sparks, he's alive, gorgeous, and Frank is just a little enamored. His associates give their thoughts.
Credit to your genius, master.
Yes.
Triumph of your will.
Yes.
He's okay.
But all that truly matters is Frank and Rocky's happiness. They offer a subtle look at what they're gonna do next, but are interrupted by a frozen biker who runs amok. He plays a sax, and Columbia with an experienced hand, but Frank is unimpressed and takes it out on Eddie. Hey, at least Brad got a sax out of the deal. Later, both Brad and Janet get a late-night visitor who happens to be Frank. Afterwards, Janet gets a bit dramatic.
only we hadn't made this journey. If only the car hadn't broken down. If only we were amongst friends.
But puts these concerns out of her head when she sees Rocky. This leads to some sexy time and a show from Magenta and Columbia. Frank's rival, Dr. Scott, shows up and goes on an impromptu but scenic tour of the house, ultimately crashing through a wall, which is strange considering there's an elevator. Theories as to Dr. Scott's arrival are discussed, but ultimately dropped as Rocky and Janet are caught spooning, leading to a weird but wonderful game of names.
Janet!
Dr. Scott!
Rock!
Dan?
Seth.
Jacob?
Triv?
Nick?
Jacob?
Seth.
Knight?
Dan?
Triv.
Angela?
Brad?
Janet! Rock!
Jacob.
Nick?
Knight?
Seth?
Jacob?
Angela.
Dan?
Rocky.
Angela?
Janet?
Dr. Scott!
Magenta breaks attention with a call for dinner. The meal is handled with expert care and a proper silverware setting. Rule of thumb is to start from the outside on the apparent 7-course meal. Or maybe 3. Anyway, Frank threatens everyone with an electric carving knife, as you do on special occasions, and Dr. Scott sings about his missing nephew, who also happens to be Eddie. Frank pulls a tablecloth out from everyone to reveal a surprise. Eddie looks like hell, but still rocks some pretty great hair. Frank has had it with everyone and pulls the Medusa switch, offering a poignant sentiment.
It's not easy having a good time.
And reminding us that the show must go on.
Come, we are ready for the floor show.
The criminologist speculates on the goings-on.
What diabolical plan had seized Frank's crazed imagination?
And then we find out the goings-on involves a stage show which features a sexy cast along with the absolutely fabulous Frank. It turns out Dr. Scott has some great legs and adds to the show in his own way. Everybody seems to have a really great time getting wet, but Riff Raff and Magenta drop the hammer, and Frank's only recourse is to go the power ballad route to explain things. Riff Raff is unimpressed, and Frank ends up on the wrong end of a trident laser thing. Rocky rescues Frank, repelling laser beams with his sexiness. Unfortunately, an ill-advised climb up the RKO logo ends badly, and Riff Raff tells Dr. Scott, Janet, and Brad to leave before the house departs for space. The two sexy transsexuals do the time warp one more time, and the house departs the planet as we're left with one final reminder that this is a work of fiction. So the Rocky Horror Picture Show is a 1975 musical horror comedy based on the 1973 stage play with music and story written by Richard O'Brien. He wanted to combine the over-the-top dialogue and unintentional humor of B-movies with rock and roll. Basically, its aim was to be equal parts parody and tribute to mid-century sci-fi and B-movies. The original musical went into rehearsal with the working title of They Came from Denton High, only to be changed later to the Rocky Horror Picture Show. It premiered in London, running for 6 years, also running on Broadway in 1975. The actual movie started production in 1974 with both the chief location and many of the props being reused from Hammer horror movies. The tank and dummy used for Rocky's birth were originally used in The Revenge of Frankenstein. This was Tim Curry's first theatrical role, and he modeled Frank's voice after Queen Elizabeth. Pierre LaRoche, a former stylist for David Bowie, helped to create the Frankenfurter look. The manor house they used didn't have heat during the midwinter shoot, so both Boswick and Sarandon ended up getting sick, but didn't stop working. The movie is packed with symbols of classic movie studios, which, in a film honoring that era, is a pretty cool Easter egg. The shield with the griffin represents Warner Brothers, the radio tower at the end is clearly RKO, Columbia represented the movie company of the same name, the large snarling cat in the hallway is an MGM Lion reference, the lit globe at the end references Universal Studios, and Columbia wears Mickey Mouse ears, a clear Disney reference. It opened in 8 cities, but only did well in 1. It also released on college campuses as a double feature with Phantom of the Paradise, but still only drew small crowds. Fox went a different route, deciding to try midnight showings, which started in New York on April Fool's Day 1976, and it spread from there. In many places, people would get in free if they wore costumes, and before long, most screenings were accompanied by a live fan cast. By 1978, Rocky Horror was playing in over 50 locations at midnight on Fridays and Saturdays. It continued to be played in theaters because of a 20th Century Fox policy for archival films to be available to theaters at any time. After its purchase by Disney, this policy was discontinued, with the one exception of Rocky Horror. For that reason, you can still find it playing pretty regularly at a variety of LA theaters. During the stage play's initial run, a patron yelled at Janet to buy an umbrella while she walks through the rain with a newspaper over her head. This became a running gag among the audience and became known as counterpoint dialogue. You can still see it today as a standard part of midnight showings with a specific set of props and lines to be used at designated times throughout the movie. There are numerous websites to guide you through the terms, possible costumes, and even a virgin's guide for first-timers. The midnight movie experience, complete with audience participation, went on to help the room achieve a similar level of cult status. The cultural significance of the Rocky Horror Picture Show can't be understated. The colorful hair, torn fishnets, and glitter are said to have been partially responsible for the punk rock culture of the 80s. The messages of sexual openness and sloughing off of traditional norms are easy enough to see. Its style and tone have influenced everything from Rob Zombie's House of a Thousand Corpses to Anna of the Apocalypse. Richard O'Brien planned a sequel in 1979 called Rocky Horror Shows His Heels. For a variety of reasons, it wasn't meant to be. However, it did lead to Shock Treatment, which continues Brad and Janet's unique story in the town of Denton. I covered this last Halloween, and I can tell you the music and story are biting and funny. If you take nothing else from this review, please add Shock Treatment to your viewing list. 2 more attempts were made at sequels, one in 1993 called Revenge of the Old Queen, that ended up being indefinitely shelved. The other was in 2001 with the working title Rocky Horror: The Second Coming. It used major plot points of Rocky Horror Shows His Heels along with all new songs. The 2016 remake, The Rocky Horror Picture Show, Let's Do the Time Warp Again, featured Laverne Cox as Dr. Frankenfurter and Tim Curry as the criminologist. It received mixed reviews, saying it was a strong ensemble effort, but it was a difficult task to recreate the magic of the original. But since it's such an exceptional beauty, I'm prepared to forgive it. Generally, there's not a lot I can say that hasn't already been said. I actually didn't see Rocky Horror until a lot later than I like to admit. My first exposure to it was hearing Time Warp when I worked at a Halloween store. The fascination with this song led me to a full-blown midnight showing with props and a full cast. Since then, I have such a love for this property, and every rewatch brings something new to my attention. As someone who adores B-movies and sci-fi in general, I so appreciate the love that this brings to the forefront. Tim Curry, Richard O'Brien, and the entire cast put so much into this, and I love them all for making it. There is nothing quite like Rocky Horror. It's a perfect storm of personalities, inspiration, and music that came together to create a piece for the ages. When Rocky Horror first released, Roger Ebert called it a long-running social phenomenon more than a movie, and I think that pretty well sums it up, despite the 2.5 out of 4 rating. I don't know if Richard O'Brien, his cast, and crew had any idea of the impact and longevity of this movie, but I for one am incredibly glad that 46 years later, we're still doing the Time Warp. As a reminder for those on the Candy Corn Conga line, make sure to check out the end screen or the description for the link for your next vid. Happy viewing! So what do you think? Suggestions for movies, trivial questions, comments, ratings, and the steps to the Time Warp would be appreciated. Thank you so very much for watching.